Well, happy Monday. Welcome back, everybody. Today is right before what's tonight? Purim Katan. And tonight is Purim Katan, and this week's Torah portion is a interesting Torah portion because the second Aliyah, which we're going to talk about in today's halacha, is very, very long. And we're not going to call up the person for the second Aliyah, who is usually the Levite, the Levi. We'll talk about tonight why, but I'll probably briefly mention it here. Okay, so today, we're moving along over here. We're on chapter 23. Moving along over here, chapter 23. We'll talk about bringing out the Sefer Torah. So you're in shul, the Ark opens up, and they're about to bring out the Torah. What's the proper way to do it? Where do you put it? Now, this is Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, the shortened, abridged version. And I must also add, so it's the abridged version. So you're not going to get all the details. There's many more details. And I'll try to sprinkle in what we practically do. And I'm the gabbai. So my role is to make sure the minyan or the prayer service moves along and there's no hiccups. And if something interesting happens, I'm the one that deals with it. I usually just ask the rabbi, the main rabbi, and he tells me what to do. But I want to add, what did I want to add? I wanted to add something and I don't remember. What I want to add is sometimes we learn halacha, we learn laws, Jewish laws, and we kind of become a little bit know-it-alls. It usually comes from a place of excitement. I learn these laws and a lot of people don't know the laws. So we feel perhaps it's in the best interest if the other person that's doing it wrong, they know, and I should tell them. The best course of action, we're going to learn some laws and people probably do it wrong and whatnot. Even from the ladies section, they'll call out and scream out. Best thing to do is ask the person that's in charge quietly to be like, I think that person did it maybe incorrectly, or somebody that is well respected within the community or within the shul. To that person should go ahead and correct the person. We shouldn't be the ones that correct that person because people will get easily offended. It's like I remember in a pet peeve of mine would be in class, if somebody would ask a question, or even myself, and then I would ask it, I'd pose the question to the teacher, and then another student would answer the question, even though I asked it to the teacher. And even if that student was right, and he probably was, it was very annoying. It's like an ego thing. Clearly, it doesn't come from a good place. The person who feels upset about it, but nevertheless, you shouldn't do it. So don't. So now that you're learning laws, it's very, and you got to be able to take it well. If somebody else tells you you're doing something wrong, just say thank you and then just move on. It's the best. It's always the best when the person that was in the class who would answer the question would get it wrong. That feel avenged. Yeah. But of course, I don't really act like that anymore. Anyway, it all falls under the same category. I'm sure you can appreciate it. I'm sure we know people like that. I'm sure we do it ourselves. But the relationship is between you and God, and it's not. Let's keep everyone happy and satisfied, and we'll have shalom and peace. Okay. When the Sefer Torah, otherwise known as the Torah scroll, is taken from the Aron HaKodesh, the Holy Ark, how do you carry it? It's to be carried to the reader's Lectern, where the reading takes place. What we call the reader's Lectern is called the bring it to somebody answer. I'm already forgetting. Let me just see what it says over here. Nice and nice al teva. Okay, they call it a teva. Okay, we use a different term, and it's leaving my mind right now because I had a lot of pasta. I think. Okay, to be carried to the reader's lectern, where the reading will take place. It's to be carried toward the north. That is to the right of the carrier. So what happens? The guy will take out the Torah. You're facing the ark, the Aron, and you turn around and you face the congregation, and then you walk to your right. You walk to your right. Now, some people have the custom of going all the way around the I can't believe I'm forgetting it. Going all the way around the center where the Torah, the Teva, where the Ark will be read. It's slipping in my mind. I have no idea why. Probably say it like 50 times a day. Somebody's going to answer. Somebody has the answer to the question. I see it in the chat over here. No, not the Stender. Good. The Stender is where that's a good guess. They walk around, and they'll walk around so the whole entire congregation can kiss it. That's our custom as well, and we take a long path. So the ladies section will also get a chance to kiss the Torah. That's only done on Rosh Hashanah, on Shabbos, so like Yom Tovim, where a lot of people are in the congregation. But on a standard Monday and Thursday reading, like we had today, we go right to the center where the Torah is read. By the way, there is a halacha, a Jewish law, that the Torah must be read in the center of the synagogue. And that wasn't always the case. It used to be, and you'll still see it in some what's called shtiblach, like smaller shuls, where there is no room to do it in the center. But it must be read in the center. And the reason why, it used to be that you could read it in the front. But because then churches started to adopt this speaking from the pulpit type of thing all the way to the front, we try to distance ourselves. The communities try to distance themselves from that practice, from other religions, and we moved it to the center. That's according to one opinion. It's probably the most common opinion why we do that. We do not face the congregation when reading the Torah. We'll get to that. The Bima. Thank you very much. The Bima. Thank you, Rivka. Thank you. The Bima. The Bima, where we read the Torah is called the Bima. We face, I'm sure we'll say it here in Shulchan Aruch, but we face east when we read the Torah, as opposed to a lot of, Reform and conservative. I don't like to give labels, but that's how they label themselves. Reform and conservative shuls, they face the congregation. That also comes from Christian, or that's a church thing. We never did that, by the way. That was something we never did. You always face east. Okay, let's keep going. When it is returned to the Aron, it is carried toward the south. In other words, you just make a big circle. What you end up doing is you're going to make a big circle. The Sefer Torah must be held in the right hand when it is carried, even for a lefty. It is a mitzvah for everyone before whom the Sefer Torah passes to accompany it to the reader's lectern, to the Bima. The Bima will be where we are reading the Torah. I do find that a lot of people don't do that. They don't follow the Torah. You should follow the Torah like a procession. It shows honor to the Torah, like as if a king is walking, or someone of royalty is walking with you. You walk behind it. You should try to follow it. Now, if you're a woman, it's a little more difficult. Usually you're, behind the mechitza, or you're up top, or you're behind some trees, fake trees. So the men, we got to do that. The Ola, that's the person being called to the Torah. Being called to the Torah is called an aliyah, which literally means an elevation. When somebody moves to Israel, becomes a citizen of the state of Israel, or really just you move to the land of Israel, it's called an aliyah because you're elevated. Now you're going to a more holy status, so to speak. Not saying you should move to Israel. I'm not saying you shouldn't, but so the Ola, the person being called to the Torah, should wear a talis with tzitzis. If you don't have a talis, you'll see like in Chabad shuls, young men don't wear a talis, the big shawl. They don't wear that when they get to the Torah reading. It's because they have tzitzis underneath their garments. Yeah, those little fringes that we spoke about a long time ago. If you do not wear tzitzis and you get called to the Torah, then you should put on a talis. So you should take now. Not every shul, not every place is like that. Chabad is like that, but in other shuls, other synagogues, they may require you to wear a talis, even if you're not wearing, even if you're only wearing tzitzis. Now Chabad has a custom not to wear a talis until we're married. Now again, if it depends on what your custom is. If you came from a Sephardic background, I'm saying a Chabad person who takes on Chabad minhagim, Chabad customs. It's the custom within Chabad. Not saying none of you should change anything yet. If you're doing something differently, is that we don't wear a talis until we're married. if you decide to take on Chabad customs, some Chabad customs, but you've been doing something differently for a long time. For example, let's say when you prayed, you always wear a talis. And then you're like, you know what? I want to take on the Chabad custom of not wearing a talis. Well, there's something in halacha in Jewish law called a chazaka. When you do something 3 times intentionally, some say even unintentionally, but certainly intentionally, that becomes your custom, and you can't just stop doing it. You actually have to go before a small bezdin, a small court. And what's a small court? 3 men that learn Torah. That's all you need. So you can do it in some corner of the shul or wherever you're at, and say, I don't want this custom anymore. Do you absolve me from this custom? That's the easiest way to do it. And they say, yes. I think you have to ask 3 times. And you have to make a chazaka 3 times. Again, this idea of 3, chazaka literally means a strength. It's strengthened. It's like bound. It's in stone. And so you have to do something. You have to say it 3 times, and then that's it. You can stop doing it. But you must do that beforehand. Anyway, I remember one time I was at Hillel at Harvard, and I wasn't married, and I asked them. They said they gave me an aliyah, which I didn't want, but they gave me an aliyah, and I anticipated them saying to me, here's a talis. So I actually said, is it okay if I don't wear a talis? It's not my custom. And the guy said, no, you must wear a talis. So I put on a talis. Just remember that. I wasn't traumatized or anything, but I believe that was the last time I ever wore a talis when I wasn't married. Okay, so he should take the shortest route. Okay, sorry. The Ola, the person getting called to the Torah, should wear a talis with tzitzis. He should take the shortest route to get there and return to his seat. So when the aliyah is over, you should take the longest route. If both routes are of equal distance, like me, I sit very close to the bima, so it doesn't really make a difference. Truth, I don't really sit. I just walk around a lot. If both routes are of equal distance, then he ascends to the right and descends by the other route. Whatever. You should take the shortest way to get there and the longest way back. It's usually not such an issue. It's customary to wait until the person called after him has completed his last bracha. Then he descends between readings. So why the longest way? Why do we wait so long? To show honor to the Torah. We're not trying to leave the Torah very quickly. Some people walk backwards away from the Torah a certain amount of distance. Well, that's not our custom. I'm not even sure that's really a custom. I think people just feel the necessity to do that, but that's not a custom, as far as I know. In the Beis HaMikdash, in the Holy Temple, if you ever take a tour, you can go take a tour right now in the Western Wall. Go right now. Now you can go to the Western Wall. You can take a tour, and you can climb up stairs. They have excavation sites. You can climb up the steps to get to the temple, certain area of the temple. And you'll notice one of the tour guide pointed out to me that she was very good. She said, as he was walking down, she said, "Isn't it difficult to walk down these steps?" And I was thinking to myself, physically, it's very difficult to walk down these steps. And she pointed out, she goes, if you notice, the steps are not evenly. They're not even. Like some steps are much thinner than other steps, which are longer. So you have to walk down slow, or you're gonna fall. You feel like you're gonna fall. And it was done by design, so that people wouldn't rush down when they left the temple. They wouldn't rush down the steps. You have to go slow, otherwise you're gonna tumble. I wonder how many people tumbled. Not to laugh, I do find it funny when people fall. Okay, so we do have this concept of, again, not moving away from the Sefer Torah very quickly. And the person carrying the Torah should not go fast. You should walk very slowly. I was once the ring bearer at my uncle's wedding. We don't really do that, but it was, it wasn't a frum wedding. I was a little boy, and I had practiced a few times carrying the ring down the aisle. And then when the big day came and everyone was ready to take pictures, as a cute little kid in a tux, I basically ran. I went so fast. I have no idea why. Everyone's like, slow down. I just always remember that. When you open the Sefer Torah and look at the place, so you shouldn't go very quickly. When you're holding the Torah, especially, move slow. the Rebbe would actually stare at the Torah the entire time. So whenever the Torah was being passed around, wherever the Torah was, wherever it was being carried to, the Rebbe would stare with his eyes. I don't even think the Rebbe blinked, but watch the Torah be carried away. Oh, wouldn't even look inside his siddur. And the Rebbe would always look inside his siddur to say brachas, to pray. And there are certain things that we say, which we'll mention, when the Torah is taken out and when it's put back. Hallelujah, Shem Hashem. We say these certain things. And some of them are very long and they're in Aramaic. The Rebbe would say it by heart, staring at the Torah. I can't do that. Maybe I could, but I don't try. I don't bother. Open the Sefer Torah and look at the place to be read. Okay, so you get up to the Torah, you get to your Aliyah. You'll see what's going to happen. The guy reading the Torah is going to open it up. He's going to point. He's going to say, kiss here, or look here, and look here. What is he pointing to? Where we're going to start and where we're going to end. You're supposed to follow along when they're reading the Torah. If even everybody is, but especially the one getting the Aliyah has to follow along every word. Now, you should even be saying every word. But most of us don't know. We didn't prepare the laning, as we call it. We didn't prepare the reading. So at the very least, you should follow along, and that's why he has what's called the yad. A lot of times they have the yad, that little hand, metal hand, and he's going over each word as he reads it, so that you stay focused and you know which word they're holding back. So you open the Sefer Torah, look at the place to be read, and hold it open with both hands. This is another place where Chabad, I wonder if he brings it down over here. Chabad has a different custom. The custom in some is to close this. Yeah, exactly. In Chabad, we actually close the Torah. So we open the Torah. And the Baal Koira, literally the master of reading, the one who's going to read it, points in the where we're going to start and we're going to stop. You give a little kiss with your talus. If you didn't give the kiss, it's okay. And then we close the Torah and then we say the brachas. Baruch Hu es Hashem hamavorach. A lot of other places, I'm not sure if Sephardim do it, or not all Sephardim, but a lot of other places leave it open slightly. Then close your eyes and say Baruch Hu es Hashem hamavorach. You don't have to close your eyes. And I'll explain in a second. You can read it. In fact, we don't close our eyes. You should say this loud enough for the entire congregation to hear. Now, once you say Baruch Hu es Hashem hamavorach, everyone says Baruch Hashem hamavorach le'olam va'ad. If the congregation did not hear you say Baruch Hu es Hashem hamavorach, even though they heard the reader responding Baruch Hu es Hashem hamavorach, yes, sometimes people get up there and they say it very quietly. Baruch Hu es Hashem hamavorach. You can't hear them if you're way back. So what do? You do not respond with him. You don't say Baruch Hu es Hashem hamavorach. Now, that's what it says here in Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. I'm not sure in actuality, or as we say, bipoil, in actuality. People do it. People say it anyway. So I go with the flow. We say it. We do say, whether we hear it or not, we respond. Instead, after the reader has responded, they respond amen to the reader. Okay, whatever. You can do that, but we respond normally, like no problem. After the congregation has responded, Baruch Hu Hashem hamavorach le'olam va'ad, then he repeats it, Baruch Hu Hashem hamavorach le'olam va'ad. Yeah, and it keeps going. You'll read it inside. Then you remove your left hand, you open it up, and you basically hold it with your right hand. You should read along quietly. The reader may not begin to read until the congregation completes saying Amen. That's why you'll hear usually the reader will say, before he's about to read, he goes, Amen. Why it's so long? Because he's telling you, hurry up with your amens, people. I'm about to read. You're going to cause me a problem if you don't be quiet. So he goes, Amen. A very long amen. The entire congregation should be attentive and listen carefully to the Torah reading. After the completion of the reading, you, the Ola, the one reading the Torah, should hold it again with your left hand, roll the Torah close, and recite the last blessing. Now, we recite it, we read it. The reason why we close the Torah is because we close the Torah before we say the blessings. Baruch Hu Hashem Mevorach, Baruch Hashem Mevorach Le'Lavad, Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam Asher Baruch Haba Mikol Amim V'Nasan Lanu Teirosai, Baruch Atah Hashem Neisen HaTorah. Amen. The reason why we close it is because you don't want anybody to think. Oh, thanks. We don't want anybody to think that we're reading from the Torah. You'll see a lot of other people. Yeah, like I just said before, Ashkenazim, especially Ashkenazi Jews, except for Chabad. Chabad follows a lot of Kabbalah, so Sephardic and Chabad customs are very similar. They leave it open, but they have to make sure their head is turned. You should turn your head you should turn your head to the right. That's why when they put the siddur down or they put like a piece of paper down for you to read, it's usually down and to the right. So we know for sure you're not reading from the Torah. Because as we're going to say, you have to hear every word of the Torah reading. To the extent, if you're in the middle of the Shmona Esrei, the Amida prayer, in which you are almost never allowed to interrupt your Amida prayer. Even if a dangerous snake is crawling up your leg, God forbid, you do not run away. Only if a king is for sure going to cut off your head, as it says in Shulchan Aruch, then for sure, if you feel like your life is going to be taken, then with regards to a king, you can stop. But other than that, you can't ever stop. When the Torah is being read, you stop and you keep your eyes in the siddur and you listen to what's going on. The downside of that, by the way, is you have not fulfilled your obligation of hearing the Torah reading. You have a separate obligation on Torah reading days to hear the Torah being read. Now, if you don't hear the Torah being read, says the Ram, let's say you're in a situation where you can't hear the Torah. So the Rambam says in his Mishnah Torah, you should read it from a chumash yourself. Like I do Shabbos afternoon, I almost never make it back to shul. So I'll read it in the back of the siddur, usually pretty quietly. I'll like lane it to myself. Yeah, you should try to do that. We read the Torahs Mondays, Thursdays, Shabbos morning, and Shabbos afternoon, consistently. Of course, if there's Rosh Hashanah, if there's Rosh Chodesh, another day you read the Torah. But Moses said the Torah we should not go 3 days without ever reading the Torah. It's not written in the Torah. That's oral tradition. Moses instituted that. So we read the Torah Mondays, Thursdays, and Shabbos. Ezra, who lived at the time of Purim, yeah, he was Mordechai, probably good friends with Mordechai. And he was the one Ezra was the one that said, hey, Jews, let's go back to Israel. And only 30,000 of us went back. Most of the Jews continue to live in Babylonia, Bavel. He instituted there should be a reading on Saturday after Shabbos afternoon. Why? Because there are people who won't be able to make it to shul on Monday and Thursday because they work. We're even talking 2,000 years ago. Yeah, people worked even then. They're not going to make it to work, and so they're going to feel kind of bad that they're not going to hear the Torah readings on Mondays and Thursdays. So whatever the Torah reading that we're going to read on Monday and Thursday, let's also read it Shabbos afternoon. Ezra set that up. He set up a few things, and one of them being, the second Holy Temple. That was pretty cool. But and Bris Milah. No, not Bris Milah. The second Holy Temple. But another one was the Torah reading Shabbos afternoon. If you're not going to be able to make it, you should try to read it inside. It's very short. We only read the first aliyah of the upcoming parsha. So this week's parsha is Kisisa. Monday, we only read the first aliyah. That's what we read today. That's what we'll read again Thursday. And that's what we read last Shabbos afternoon. It is forbidden to hold the Sefer Torah with bare hands. The Chachamim, the sages, made a decree that touching the actual Torah with your bare hands is like touching Tuma. It's Matame. You can't do that. That's why we kiss it with a talus, or we use that little yad. It's called the yad, the hand, that little metal hand. So you're not allowed to hold it with your bare hands. Rather, you should hold it by the means of the talus, or hold it by its poles. Obviously, we hold it by its poles. There are some who refrain from touching even the poles with bare hands, only with the talus. Chabad has that custom. The Rebbe did it that way. If you didn't do it, don't worry. Obviously, it's only a custom. I shouldn't say only a custom. It's a custom. Now, when you're rolling the Torah, sometimes, you have to roll it sometimes because especially you only have one Torah. Say you're in your shul. And you got to read the Rosh Chodesh reading and the Shabbos reading. So you got to do some rolling sometimes. And when you roll it, it could get like a little bit incongruent. It can get like out of whack. Yeah, the cloth, the actual parchment doesn't always roll straight. So you have to like move it, and you feel like moving it with your hands to get it straightened up. But you should use your talus. That's when you would touch it with your talus, typically. That's when we touch it with our talus. It happens very often. If you know, you know. Yeah, I like that line. If you know, you know. If you're there, you know. The Ola, as well as the reader, is required to stand. It is even forbidden to lean on something, for we must stand in awe. For just as the Torah was given in awe, so too we must conduct ourselves concerning it in awe. However, a weak person may lean a little for support. Now, what about if you're someone listening to the Torah? Do you have to stand? You'll see a lot of people do stand. While the Ola recites the bracha, okay, here we go. Let me just get in here. The congregation is not obliged to stand, but those who are scrupulous, it's called mahudar, yeah, in the observance of mitzvahs, demand more of themselves and stand. And this is appropriate. But between readings, there is no need whatsoever to be stringent. So you do not need to stand, but you will see a lot of people that do stand. Let's do one more. You do not have to stand. If the reader himself is called up as the Ola, which very often happens, our reader, one of our main readers, is a Kohen. So I give him the first Aliyah. And what does he do? Another person should actually stand at his side, just as though the Torah was given through an intermediary, that is Moshe Rabbeinu. So too should we conduct ourselves to hear the reading with an intermediary. Okay, so what should happen is that if I call up the Kohen and he's the actual reader, so he's going to stand there all by himself. We don't do that. A person should stand next to him as if he was getting the Aliyah also, because we want it to be done through an intermediary. We say that when we read the Torah, it's as if we're given that parsha from Moses' mouth. The first time we were ever given it, it's like standing in front of the giving of the Torah. It's as if God is speaking through the one who's reading the Torah. He's not God, obviously. God forbid you should ever make a mistake like that or think that we think that. But because the Torah was given through an intermediary, same thing. Since the Balkara is, basically the word of God is coming through his mouth, there should be someone next to him as if it's being given through an intermediary. Whatever. Bottom line is, you should have someone stand right next to you. Does anybody have any questions? I think the next halacha is kind of long. It's not actually. Okay. Here we go. I've been told that some face north to pray because it's a shorter distance going over the North Pole to Israel. What's that? Oh, I've never heard that before. It's a good question. I'm not sure. We do face. If you want wisdom, it says what does it say? The lechem upon him was in the south. It was in the north, and that has to do with wealth. Okay. If you want a little bit of wealth, we pray to the east. You pray towards Jerusalem, but you should face slightly a little bit towards the north if you want wealth. And if you want wisdom, you should face slightly south. So you should pray east, but turn your head a little bit south. That's for wisdom, because that's where the menorah was. The menorah represents wisdom. And in the north was the showbread, which represents parnasa, wealth, which we spoke about two parshias ago. But other than that, I don't know praying north or south. We certainly always pray east. Or if you're on the other side, you pray west. Yeah, if you're on the other side of the prime meridian, is that what it's called? Once the reader has begun to read, here we go, last halacha, the entire congregation is forbidden to indulge in conversation, even about Torah subjects. Conversation is forbidden even between readings. It's forbidden to leave the synagogue while the Torah is being read. But between readings, when the Sefer Torah is being rolled up, one may leave if the need is great. Okay, so typically if you have children, you got to go to the bathroom, you really need to say something to somebody, you can leave.